What's up, everybody? This is Talkative Carl back again for another spoiler review for the month of October. And oh my god, I just could not wait to get into this. We'll be talking about, this video and another video right after that. I'll be talking about the Brendan Fraser's Mummy movies, the first one and the second one. Don't know if I ever will do the third one, which is like very bad. I mean, not the worst movie ever, but it's a slog to get through. But if enough of you guys leave a comment and say like, "Hey, do a review for the Mummy, the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor," do that, then like if enough of you guys want it, I will definitely at some point get to it. But right now, for this month, I definitely want to cover. Well, there's 3 Brendan Fraser movies I want to cover for the month of October. The first 2 Mummy movies, and one of my other favorite, it's probably will be my second favorite Brendan Fraser film, Bedazzled. But I'll do that tomorrow. So I'll try to get that up to you guys as soon as I can. But we'll start off with like honestly best. I know there's the Boris Karloff's The Mummy, and that is technically the original back in the 30s, I think, where during the same period as Count Dracula, the Bram Stoker's not Bram Stoker, Bela Lugosi version of Count Dracula, and then the same era as like the Wolfman and the Invisible Man. Like, I know, but for all intents and purposes, everybody remembers the Brendan Fraser 1999 The Mummy, and arguably the best Mummy movie. No, matter of fact, speaking of the worst Mummy movie, matter of fact, I think I just slightly like Tomb of the Dragon Emperor better than the Tom Cruise Mummy film. The Tom Cruise Mummy film, I just want to put it out there for you guys. Now we're on the subject. That's probably got to be like the worst movie. I won't say the worst movie, but it's definitely up there as far as it's definitely a bad film. But the only reason it gets my ire more so than most other films is that not only you had a great idea for because you have like a female mummy, because they was trying, the Dark Universe was the Universal was trying to reinvigorate the Dark Universe with all these classic horror movie monsters in like modern times, which I was all psyched for, because not many people know that it wasn't the MCU who started this whole shared universe thing. It was the Universal Monsters back in the day who started this thing in the first place. And I don't think it was never really replicated like that. I think they tried to do that with Freddy vs. Jason, trying to do like a crossover and maybe get into like other slashers, but that didn't bear fruit. It wasn't until like the MCU actually got the ball rolling. But DC and Universal was trying to play during the era of Tom Cruise Mummy films around that time. Everybody else was trying to play catch up with Disney, and you're too far behind at this point. And I mean, they eventually got it right with the Invisible Man movie that came out in 2020, and like I mentioned plenty of times, they're making a Wolfman movie after that success with Ryan Gosling as like the Wolfman. But like I did with the Dracula Untold review, and that's getting a lot of views. Greatly appreciate it. I knew I wasn't the only one who loves that film. It should have started with that. As far as if they want to build like a shared universe, obviously you have to start off with Dracula. But the idea of having like a female mummy, because the core cast of the classic horror movie monsters was a bit of a sausage fest. But having like a female mummy, that was cool. And the mummy was Anck-Son-Namun, which they pretty much got from this film, or at least these two films, where like she was the love interest of Imhotep, but now she's like her own thing. But they not only they kind of like really kind of butchered it with trying to like, instead of making like just like a solid movie on its own right and not worry about trying to incorporate like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and like showing you like the hand of the creature of the Black Lagoon, and in one case, and another case see like a vampire's head, a skull, and it's like you too worried about doing everything all at once. It's like trying to fit everything in one pile, and it's all discombobulated. But then Tom Cruise and his freaking ego, it just like you're like the female mummy is supposed to be like the part of the main roster in this shared universe, but because like I don't know what it is with these celebrities, when they get like reach to a certain level of fame, they get big egos, and they can just take them ego to the side. At least, well, Tom Cruise in this case can he still like to shoot films where he depicted as taller than he actually is. According to reports, we know his actual height, but he's that much of an ego. One says, I think Donald Trump is like the more egotistical person alive to date, but Tom Cruise has got like such a big ego, he can't like fathom people looking at him as like a short guy on screen by like doing one of the Mission Impossible movies with Jeremy Renner in it. Jeremy Renner is definitely taller than Tom Cruise, but they trying to depict him as the same height, and he just refused to take a back seat to a movie monster that isn't him. And so they kind of like he fiddled with too much of everything and put too much of his own 2 cents in, and worked it to a way that he's got to be like the main monster in this whole entire thing. And it's like they could have started something, but nobody had the balls to tell Tom Cruise, no, you're in they could have just cast somebody else, because like y'all should know who you are dealing with when you're hiring Tom Cruise. If he's not gonna be like the main star, which he's gonna expect to be, then you should hire somebody else. Like, of course, you could have just left it at his sidekick as like the main guy, and some other dopey sidekick. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure he has no problem taking a backseat or a supporting role in a movie that's supposed to be setting up the mummy. But Tom Cruise, he had to be like the main star so freaking bad. So they kind of, it was a whole thing. It's like, I don't even know if I even want to watch that again. And it was such a, like, I never known a movie that gets under my skin as much as that particular movie does. It is just like, it gets on my nerves how like we're getting on the right track now thanks to The Invisible Man. But man, for a time, the Tom Cruise Mummy movie made me sick to my stomach. It was that, even more so than like, the Killing Joke movie where Batgirl's having sex with Batman. That just grossed me out. But that didn't catch my eye more so than like Tom Cruise Mummy. I'm just going to say that right now. It's a lot. But anyway, the good movie, the Brendan Fraser version. We begin with in the city of Thebes, and Seti the First, the pharaoh, was ruling the land. Everything seems all good, and then you meet like Emotep, who, matter of fact, when you look at the opening shots, I know it has like a weird. To me, it kind of has like a weird the way that ancient Egypt is shot. It has like some weird mix of decently held up CGI and very PS2 era kind of graphics. You can tell it's dated, but at the same time you don't mind it. It's like I think the way like the director and cinematographer, the way they set up this movie, it's like, I don't know if it's like a happy accident, but I think they made it in a way that they somehow knew. This is just me thinking personally. I feel like they somehow knew we're gonna make it to where it's gonna hold up, or we're gonna make this like a memorable thing. And like lo and behold, to this day, the Mummy films, at least the first two, are easily considered one of Brendan Fraser's best films, held in extreme high regard. It's as far as like nostalgic films. Now, during 1999, I think like the Phantom Menace came out in that same year. Now, a lot more people went to that because we was a little more familiar with Star Wars, and the Mummy movie was kind of a unknown quantity. And it wasn't until word of mouth spread that people, gathered to go see this film, and it's, doing this like the box office, gross box office. It had a budget of $80 million and it grossed $416.4 million. That is freaking impressive. But the way the ancient Egypt was shot, it brought me back to my review of the last season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Check that video out on the channel as well. I got like all the season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters each season reviewed. But the last season of Duel Monsters, before I got into GX eventually, it just brought me back to that, when it's like you're finally in ancient Egypt and you see like in the show you see like a little more hustle and bustle and like a lively city of ancient Egypt at the time. This one you only get like certain shots. You get like a over expanding shot of like the pyramids and like statues and stuff like that, and then like you see like the pharaoh riding his chariot into his home, and then you just get like inside shots. There you meet like high priest Imhotep, which, by the way, Imhotep, because Imhotep was a real priest in history, in ancient Egypt history, but he was like a healer, and like like an architect and a healer. So I'm not sure he was like an evil person. It wasn't depicted he was like in history or records of him wasn't depicted as him. I'm pretty sure like I can't imagine anybody like in like history museums who cover Imhotep probably gets a lot of questions about the Mummy movie and how accurate it is with like that Imhotep and historical Imhotep. I'm pretty sure they get that a lot around like whomever like around the world, whomever has like history museums with Imhotep inside. But Imhotep, pretty much like the pharaoh's right hand man, but he was shacking up with the pharaoh's daughter, and he's supposed to be untouched and only betrothed. The same mindset as like marrying somebody off for another kingdom to earn greater wealth and power. So she wasn't meant to be touched at all, but they had a relationship. He busted in as like which should have been like a clue that, because I'm barely remember it because is it supposed to be his room or her room? I'm pretty sure it's his room. And when he busted in, the Pharaoh's first clue is like, what do you should have been? What are you doing here? But the first thing he knows is that one of her like not tattoo, it's like just paint with like glyphs and stuff. It's a little smudged. It's not perfect. Like somebody been rubbing it off. Like who touched you? And it's like, she couldn't just had an itch or swatting a fly, and it got smudged in some way. It's like could be one of at least a few reasons off the top of somebody's head, but she just figured, oh, okay, the jig is up, and like that is Imhotep and Akhenaten just killed the pharaoh right then on the spot. Then the pharaoh's guards come bursted in, as Akhenaten convinced Imhotep, no, you go, they're gonna kill us both if they find us both here. I'm gonna stay behind. You are the only ones that you're the only one who can resurrect me. So you got to escape. And so she just pretty much, commits suicide, just not giving them the satisfaction of like torturing her or killing her themselves. She just commits suicide, seppuku in a way. I know it's Japanese, not Egyptian, but it's pretty much the same principle. So Imhotep stole her body and tried to do a ritual to bring her back from the dead so they can be together. But somehow, well, I'm not somehow, Pharaoh's guards, stopped the ritual. Now, at first I was going to say like how did they find him? But he stole the body, so eventually one of the other guards was supposed to be like watching it, or somebody came across it and saying, "Yo, this lady's tomb has been raided. Where's her body?" And they just kind of like did like a quick investigation and just found him somehow. But they stopped him in time before the ritual was complete. And Imhotep's personal guard has been mummified alive. Well, some of them seemed like tortured and mummified. Tortured, killed, then mummified. But no, yeah, they've been tortured, killed, and mummified. He, suffered the Hamdai, which is a worst of all curses, where like because of his egregious offense by their laws, they cut off his tongue. They remove his organs, even though I don't know how, because they buried him, mummified him, and then buried him still alive, and threw in these parasitic beetles that slowly eat your flesh until you're dead. But at some point, they have to remove his organs to put in these sacred jars. And if you remove somebody's organs, they automatically will immediately die. So that would mean they have to, as if I'm recalling it right, they had to remove the organs after he was like eaten up. But then the beetles would have eaten that. Yeah, I might have like misremembering the order, but they did have his organs in sacred jars. So how is he's twitching and moving and struggling while being put into the sarcophagus to be eaten by those beetles, while without just being like a dead corpse? And it's like, if you did it after, the beetles would have eaten all that. So I don't know. But all intents and purposes, they put his organs in his, like, at least maybe a few organs in the sacred jars, and with the Hamdai, he's never to be brought back. Otherwise, he'll be a walking disease, with like controls over sand and certain plagues of Egypt, like locusts, which you see him utilize. It kind of reminds me of, if you ever played Killer Instinct video game, there's a fighting game. It's like a fighter in that roster called Kon-Ra, who's a mummy himself. And I'm sure somebody who created Kon-Ra got the idea from this movie of making Imhotep, because Imhotep's powers are very reminiscent of Kon-Ra's, with like spouting, regurgitating through from his mouth all these bugs, and using like his bandages as like wraps to like he can mentally control to ensnare people, and then like and wield sand. I'm sure, like I'm like 90% sure that they got the idea for that character from this movie, because with Imhotep's powers, it's ridiculous. And then fast forward to you got Rick O'Connell, played by Brendan Fraser. He's like Roman legionnaire. Of course, at that time, I didn't know what kind of soldiers he was playing as. It wasn't until like luckily Delia's Warrior TV show that I know that he his garb or uniform is at that of a Roman legionnaire, and where he got all his skills and stuff from. So the Roman legionnaires are very, very good soldiers in their own right. I mean, like like just toughest of the tough. But we'll eventually get to that episode at some point down the line. But they are holding off because he mentioned later in the film that without orders, because they heard about like the city of the dead that they were at, the with like this like untold amount of treasures hidden beneath the sand. And that's what they're there for. He, marched there without orders, and his, his leader, after they sitting there holding off this garrison of Magi, who are, like the predecessors to the guards who was watching, or who was standing by for the pharaoh. So like their sons upon sons upon sons, were making sure they're responsible, making sure nobody releases this monster from its tomb. So this is like in 1926 is where the modern day so he's there's this character named Benny who's funny in his own right. He's just like a wormy little dude, and he talks like Backtrack, the bat from the Anastasia, and what's his name? Wow, this is kind of funny. Kevin J. O'Connor. It's pretty close to O'Connell. But yeah. So yeah, Rick O'Connell is pretty much like an adventurer in his own right. He's pretty much like it's just like a different take of Indiana Jones. And uh, he's obviously like a very Indiana Jones. Probably like the best, probably the best knockoff Indiana Jones, we've ever seen. And so he was the only person left because Benny just hightailed out of there because he's just like I said, he's just like a wormy little, scaredy cat and it's like a slimy creep. So first sign of danger, he just like books it. And I don't even know how a guy like that make it in the Legionnaire because we'll go over that episode at some point in the future. But the French Foreign Legion takes everybody in all walks of life into their ranks to serve France. But because the French Foreign Legion is like France's like elite squad, but so they take like dregs of the streets sometimes, and that's what Benny is. So I guess it makes sense. But you seem like this wormy dude is like, I don't know how he made it so far without dying yet, but Rick's all by himself, and then like he just like he makes it out of that scrape alive, having to wander the desert after some mysterious force kind of like messes with the sand and formed this face. Because of this movie and movies like this, deals with like mummies moving forward, even in the Tom Cruise one, they always have to do some kind of face in like water or sand, or in like the Tom Cruise ones, it's mostly glass, but it's always got like have like a face in it, and it's like I think like nobody did it better than like I think this one did it so much better than anything after it, because it's as a kid, because I think it was my cousins that was trying to convince me to come see this movie in the theater, but I still like because I knew about I didn't know it was Boris Karloff or anything like that, but I knew there was like I at least seen bits of the very 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 first Mummy movie with my grandfather. But I knew that like the Mummy had something to do with like horror because he teamed up with like one of the other monsters like the Wolfman and everything like that. And it's like I think I seen some of the trailers, and the way the trailers I guess was shot gave my young mind the impression this is going to be a scary movie. So I was like just adamant, I'm not going to see this. I do not want to be scared. I do not want to watch horror films. And they just promises me up and down that this is not a horror film, but it didn't help, prior to that, not that close prior to that, but, some time ago prior to that, I was kind of little compared to my cousins, and they kind of like forced me to watch the first Freddy Krueger film, Nightmare on Elm Street, that they had on VHS. And since then, I just had like a just repulsion against, like I'm just like not repulsed by, but I'm just avoid watching horror films in general. I do not like to be scared. I don't like jump scares. I don't like none of that. It wasn't until well into like the late 90s into the early 2000s where like I just got up enough of the courage to watch the Scream films. That's why like those the only ones I probably even watch. And then like sometime after in the mid 2000s when I got up the courage to watch the first Halloween film. But those are the only ones I actually will stomach. I don't really like, aside from, there's a few things here and there like Christina Ricci's movie called Cursed with like the werewolf film, and just it's just slasher films in general. I do not dig that all that much aside from Scream and the first Halloween film. But that's just my hang up. It's just like I'm just In general, I do not like those. So we meet Evelyn, played by Rachel Weisz, who is a librarian, and she, and then her brother, Jonathan, uh, well, Jonathan brings to her this this little trinket that turns out to be a key, with like a map inside to Hamunaptra, where Rick O'Connor was. But uh, uh, but when they brought it to the museum curator that they worked for, or not, it was pretty much of a museum, but she was in the library. He, accidentally, put over the candles and burnt the thing, so they didn't have no way to go. But Jonathan's like a treasure seeker kind of situation. He's in it for the money kind of situation, but he still cares. But he's like, he's like I want the, like, let's, get that gold. Like, you want to make sure he gets rich by pillaging, certain areas that they uncover. Which, while we're on the subject, rewatching this film after all these years, and I'm pretty sure it's something that's been talked about since 1999 up until now, is that the way certain, because there's like, when they find out about Rick, he's held up in this little prison area, the small prison camp held by this warden. He's pretty sure he's like Persian or something. Yeah, the warden God Hassan. That's the character's name. He's kind of like this fat, very just kind of like I won't say unkempt, but it's just like he just I just don't know what the words to put it is, like just kind of like a vile man. Not evil. He just want to make sure that, because he made a deal with Evelyn, like, I will release him, but it's pretty much like an investment that, they made a deal. It's like, Evelyn, like, I'll pay you if you release him. I just need him for something. And so, like, he's tagging along until he gets paid. And the reason I'm going to bring this up specifically is that in this film in particular, they are, this is 1933, and colonials, especially the British, you've seen a lot, like, they just, they go to different parts of the world, adventurers and treasure seekers, and they pillage this, the lands of other cultures to put in their museums, and they get paid for it, kind of thing. When I was, watching like Black Panther years ago, when I saw it in the theater for the first time, and you see the museum scene with Killmonger and the museum curator, and he brings up about like certain artifacts that, because she's British, he brings up something about artifacts that, where they came from and all that other stuff. Is like, your people took this from people like me and other cultures like me, and by and large, they got little to no deal. You just took it. And that's what essentially, you know, not to make this like kind of like this movie like a boss. It's not a boss movie. It's just a fun movie. But it's something that there is to take from this is the fact that, you know, something to point out. And I think the British people and a lot of different you know, colonists, or at least people who came from colonists in different parts of the world, who came to other parts of the world, like the British did, to pillage certain lands of other trinkets and what have you that didn't belong to them, and made profit off of that. Just like with Africa and blood diamonds and stuff like that. And I think it wasn't like, at least in recent years, they, you know, make sure they did their part in returning objects from like British and American museums and stuff like that, and return it to the lands where it was taken from, to kind of, you know, make good on certain atrocities that, you know, people like, you know, during this time period of 1933 did a lot, which was go on these expeditions to areas and pretty much, by and large, there's probably like a few outliers that, you know, had good intentions, but didn't have that mindset that, you know, what we're doing is wrong. We're taking things that's not ours and we put it in our museum. And that's something that should have been brought up with Indiana Jones. He pretty much did the exact same thing. It belongs in the museum. No, it belongs where it's at. Don't touch it. It doesn't belong to you. Even though you're an archaeologist, you know, there's like, if you look it up, there's, proper channels. Even if you're an archaeologist and you're digging up certain things, there's proper channels to, because if you're making some kind of profit or research expeditions on certain things that you're digging up, that object belongs to the region's culture that sits on that land. Like if you pull an ancient Mayan artifact, Mexico owns that artifact and it belongs to a Mexican museum. And then you will try to get like certain liberties to, you know, research this and study it and stuff like that. And then you, of course, make some kind of profit off of that. Like I said, through proper channels, not just take it and bring it back to your homeland and just, you know, do whatever you want with it. And that's just, it's effed up. And the way this movie kind of depicts, you know, some of the people of that land, like this white dude who's, you know, I don't want to guess what ethnicity this character is. So let's say like he's some form of Egyptian in his bloodline, or maybe just like just Persian or something like that. This movie is like, you know, kind of like very depicts him as like kind of this vile, you know, overweight, like, you know, just like slob. And like nobody, you know, no character in this film brings up like, maybe you shouldn't like, you know, pillage my country if you do me that kind of situation. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but it's something that probably should have. We didn't consider that when we was watching the film. At least not a lot of us was considering that when we was watching the film back in 1999. Everything's all good because this was like a fun little popcorn movie. But it's something that you definitely should think about now when it comes to seeing, because I know eventually the next Indiana Jones movie is coming out, and maybe they will bring something like that up, you know, about like taking something that's not yours from a land that you're in, you know, what's the word? When you know, kind of like breaking in somebody's house, you're trespassing. You're pretty much trespassing by and large. I mean, you're a guest until the point where you like take something that's not yours and leave to bring it back to your homeland. But yeah, this warden pretty much got like the raw end of the deal. Just pretty much like just like an oafish uh, unkempt man. Uh, it's kind of like a very bad stereotype, in a way. But anyway, they find Rick. He's locked up. Don't know why. It's never explained why they. I guess they found him and they just brought him back towards. Maybe because he was like a soldier or something. They recognize the uniform and they just don't like unknown white men in their native lands, and they just locked him up or whatever. But they get them out, and since he's the only one who's been to Amanatra, and without that map, he's the only one who can remember. So they travel on this boat, and they see like three other American adventurers slash gunmen who happens to know Rick. I guess Rick is pretty much like, the Indiana Jones here. It's like he's very well known. Matter of fact, it'll be a cool idea, not like a spinoff, but like a prequel spinoff of Rick O'Connell's and like his origins and stuff, just to see how he became like so kind of revered amongst his peers the way he is. But they were hired to like look after this Egyptologist, and being led by Benny, who's the only other person alive that's been to Amanatra. And Rick is obviously, is always funny to see like Benny and Rick together, because this is it's just funny as hell. But obviously you see Evelyn getting a little bit into Rick, because after like when she first met him, he was very like long hair, kind of ragged, even though it's like he still looks good. It looks like he have not 1 inch of dirt on him. But when he's all cleaned up and his hair cut, and it's like she's like, taking another good look at him this time. So their two dynamic is very very well done. He's like sitting his gear on the table while she's like reading and doing some research, and like he's like prepping his guns and stuff like that, and like she's like are we going into battle? Like, look, there's something out in those sands. I want to make sure I'm prepared. And like she asked him like, why did you kiss me? Well, I was about to be hanged. Seemed like a good idea at the time. And I was like, that's the wrong thing to say to a woman, but also the most clever thing, like a clever, honest response. It's clever to me because it's like an honest response that you don't expect coming, and it always gets me every time he says that line. It's just like, I was about to be hanged. It seemed like a good idea to me. And it's just funny to me. I was like, that was like a, you talk about like great casting. Brendan Fraser is the only person that could probably, I'm gonna say he's the only person, but I can't think of anybody better for this than Brendan Fraser. Thank God he was casting this above anybody else. I don't know who else was up for the role of Rick O'Connell, but I'm glad they went with Brendan Fraser. He selling this movie very hard. And the dynamics he's playing off with everybody, and this is like just hitting on all cylinders. But yeah. Then she walks away all flustered. Like, what? What did I say? Then he spots Benny and find out like, yeah, he's leading the Americans. And he just tosses Benny off the side of the boat. He's still like angrily left him alone in the desert to fight off all those magi. And it's like, he if it wasn't for the Americans making sure that he gets paid half now, half when he brings them all back, you know, because otherwise he would have, like as Rick called it. So what? You just gonna leave him out in the middle of a desert to rot? I was like, there was a plan, but these Americans are smart, so I got to pay half now, and so I have to go all the way. He tosses Benny off the side of the of the boat. It just like zero F's given, like this piece of shit. Anyway, he knows like there's wet footprints leading inside further into the boat, and it's like, well, that can't be Benny because he's still in the water and he can't climb up that fast. So he instinctively knows something's wrong. So, these group of magi is trying to like kill everybody on the ship, but Rick stops them, and there's like a big fight, and then ensues, and there's fire. So they all eventually like just hop off a board. And this is a funny scene, and it's probably like one of my favorite scenes out of the entire film. That every time I think of the Mummy movie, I think of this quote, and it's like Rick, John, and Evelyn is on one side of the river after the boat is going down, and the other Americans, Egyptologists, and Benny is on the other side of the river, and you hear Benny screaming, "Oh God, oh! Looks like I have all the horses! Hey Benny! Looks like you're on the wrong side of the river!" God, it just, every time I hear that line, it cracks me up. I love that scene. Man, I just regret that. I wish I had like trusted. Well, if it wasn't for my cousins, put me in a position of hating horror movies the way I do. I wanted to hate, but it's like it being like like just repulsed by going to horror movies. I would have gone to the theaters to see this, and got them on their word on it in the first place, and I probably would have enjoyed watching this in the theaters, because I'm pretty sure the theater was erupting with laughter, especially after that line. My God, that line was so good. I love it so much. That was great banter. Not much of banter, but just good back and forth. So they take opposite directions to go to the same destination, and like with the way the sun rises, it reveals the Hamunaptra, and they go there, and they set up camp and everything like that, and of course like the I keep blanking on their doggone name, because the leader is someone from Deuce Bigalow. Because the only thing I seen him in other stuff, but the only other thing besides in the Mummy films that I seen him in was in Deuce Bigalow movie. What is his doggone name? Oh yeah, Oded Fehr. Fehr. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, Oded Fehr. He's like he got like a short, very distinguished gray hair, but back then, back then he had this long, black mane of hair. He's very distinct. He's still, a good-looking man, but it's like back then he was like, holy crap! It's like I think a lot of women loved him back then. I'm pretty sure they still do, but he was very tall, like just like we didn't know, because we obviously know he wasn't just a white guy. He was obviously like, has Israelite blood in him, because like in the real life individual, uh, he's Israeli. Uh, so he's from Jewish origins. So it makes sense because obviously nobody's ever think about this. Like of course we know about history where like the Egyptians, like pharaohs and stuff, enslaved Israelites, which are Jews, and by and large, I know it's too. I don't know the distinction personally, but I like to think they all was like from Egypt. Well, of course, like at a certain period before their enslavement by the pharaohs, they were from like a different land, but they just migrated there and then eventually became enslaved. But there was like a long period, so eventually, they had to like, you know, meet other people. They had to meet like other Egyptians, uh, and like have children with double the ethnicity. So it's like the way his appearance looks, he can very well be have some Egyptian as well as, of course, he's Israeli, through and through, and with Jewish uh, parents or parent. But the way, like, I'm pretty sure if he does like a DNA test or whatever, you'll probably find like an Egyptian bloodline somewhere in there. This is my take on it. But the character himself is Ardith Bey, and he's the leader of the, or at least one of the leaders of the Magi, who warning them like, leave this place or die. He's trying to, like, of course he didn't explain it better enough, but I was wondering like, okay, why don't you just explain to them, if you leave this place now, otherwise if you press any further you might wake up an immortal monster that will wreak havoc on this land. Excuse me, sorry, just bumped my mouse. Instead of just explaining that in the first place, he probably could have like avoided like the mess if he just told them what is up. But maybe like either like try to keep as much as a secret as possible, otherwise you'll probably get tempted to just do it anyway, or it's just like, it's just better to just avoid trying to go into this long explanation, because you probably won't be believed anyway. But because especially around, because it's like a handful of closed-minded people back in the 30s, so it's like, unless they see it firsthand, they're not going to believe it. But you get this like a little moment between later that night between Rick and Evelyn, who clearly they was falling for each other, and like she's drunk off her butt, and he's teaching her how to box and everything like that, and she tells him that my father loved Egypt so much he married an Egyptian, and like that's how her love for Egyptian history again, because they were into it. So like I was very interested in it myself. And it was like a funny line before that. It's like, he's trying to figure out like Evelyn, and she's like, I know what is a place like me doing in a girl like this. And it's like, I did terrible British. But this is like, Razor Vice is amazing. And like those who've seen her in like the Black Widow movie should have seen her, because this is the first movie I've ever seen her in. And then besides that, the Batman Begins, and besides that, the Black Widow movie. But this is the first movie I know I've seen her in other stuff, but those three are the ones that really stick out in my mind as far as like the most memorable roles she's been in throughout my years of watching film. Those are the three that she stood out the most. and she's like an amazing actress. I love Rachel Weisz. They eventually, I mean, side note, I mentioned Yu-Gi-Oh earlier, but also it was Yu-Gi-Oh that really got me, like, I was really hooked on like Egypt pantheon and like other stuff, about ancient Egypt, because that like always fascinated me, the Egyptian culture. More so the like, well, at a time it was like tied with Japanese culture. I think Japanese is like there's a little bit more, but Egyptians like right underneath that, so far as like my interest in certain cultures in history, and like they fascinate me. And then like yeah, I had like so much an appreciation for ancient Egypt. It's just amazing. And the only thing that beat it out was the Japanese culture. But they digged a little deeper into the tomb, where the three Americans and the Egyptologists found in one area the sacred jars with Imhotep's organs and like the Book of the Dead. And while Rick, John, and Evelyn found the sarcophagus of Imhotep, which the body still looked like it's still decomposing after all this time, and you got scratches inside like the sarcophagus. He was obviously buried alive. The warden eventually died after he tried to snatch one of these hibernating beetles, thinking it was just like jewels or something. They burst out, digging into his flesh and start eating him from the inside, until he like, he screamed so loud, and he just like started running down like the hallway, as like the three looked on and just saw him just like ran headfirst into the wall and just cracked his skull. And it's like, well, he's quiet now. That was like the loudest scream I've ever heard in my life. But then the other group, their diggers got hit with pressurized salt acid, because it was like, there's booby traps. Well, in the movie there's booby traps, so they all thinking this place really is cursed, because all these little mishaps they've been having lately. And you see that in the Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Monster series, and every time they touch on going through certain Egyptian rooms and stuff like that, and buried locations, and it's like pitfalls and all these other mechanisms that they ward off from trying to repel any grave robbers that's trying to loot Pharaoh's tomb. And from what I've heard, because I looked this up a long time ago, that like certain Egyptologists say, there's, well, I don't even know there's like no booby traps. There has to be at least certain pharaohs, very high regarded pharaohs in history. They had to have some type of booby trap. Maybe not to the level of how Hollywood depicts them, but they had to have like something like, I don't know, at the very most, walls that shoot darts at the most, or something less than that, but not like something crazy like Hollywood. But it, they, by and large, I think they said like, that's, they kind of, the pharaohs and people of that time kind of just pretty much like spread, propaganda, in the land, saying like there's these curses and traps and all this other stuff that would fall upon anyone who would raid these pharaohs' tombs. And so the word spread so far. It's probably like the best propaganda, in history, just to keep people from at least for the large masses of people, it didn't work for, not everybody, because a lot of people just went on in anyway. But it could have been a whole lot worse than we know today's standards, because to this day, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who believe digging through a pharaoh's tomb will lead to a curse of some sort. But Evelyn didn't believe any of that stuff. She thought it was bunk. So eventually the Egyptologist, Evelyn saw that the Egyptologist has like the Book of the Dead. While he was sleeping, she snuck it out of his hands, starts reading from the book, and they end up waking up Imhotep. And he's starting like going after one of the Americans, and they stole his eyes and tongue. He stole his eyes and tongue because he is a walking corpse, and he's trying to regenerate by sucking the life of enough, at least 3 people in this case, in order to completely regenerate. Until then, he's still relatively vulnerable. Like he's, because like every time you see a cat, he is repelled and like he's forced away from the location, because cats are the guardians of the underworld. And pretty much kind of like, I guess, how like in Christian mythology, like certain demons are in charge of like keeping souls in line and tortured and blah blah blah. I think cats in the underworld, by Egyptian standards, follow that same kind of guideline. So far as like when Imhotep was dead, he was by and large still like tortured and everything like that. So he's very afraid of them. So until he's fully regenerated, he's still gonna be afraid of them. It's kind of like cats are his kryptonite at this point. So they all escape and went back into town, trying to like find the quickest plane ride out of this whole situation, because now they got like a walking corpse trying to follow them, and figure like, okay, well, take a plane ride out of Egypt, back to London, so you can avoid being killed by this thing. But Evelyn wanted to stay to try to put that monster back in the ground. So they all like the other 2 Americans are just like freaked out and like upset because one of their friends, like eyes and tongue got sucked out. So he's like he's barely keeping it together himself until Benny is like, he almost got killed by Imhotep himself, but until he started like pulling out all these little, kind of like a like how janitor has like this big ring full of keys. He has this kind of ring full of all these religious symbols, and he speaks in different tongues, and trying to like pretty much beg for his life in very different tongues, until he come across the Jewish star and start begging in Israeli, and like until Imhotep stop and acknowledge the language. He acknowledges that that's the language of the slaves, and so he uses pretty much like Benny as like Dracula has Renfield, and Kingpin had Wesley. Benny's that to Imhotep by this point, just sucky by comparison. So he's making sure Benny helps him gather all the sacred jars, so that way he can track down those who opened the chest filled with his jars, to use them to because it's them in particular he wants to suck the souls from, because that's part of the, I guess, the curse. Okay, you open my chest full of my organs, so whoever's there are the ones I'm sucking out their organs and skin and leaving them as a husk, essentially. Stealing their life force to replenish mine. So he did that with the Egyptian Tajas, and the other two Americans left. And like they found there the museum curator that Evelyn worked for turns out to be the head of the Magi, where Arden also works for, and they've been trying to keep this whole thing a secret for ages, because this creature cannot be stopped by any other means. The only way to stop him is sending him back to the underworld, and they need like the because there's like the Book of the Dead that brings life, and there's the book of on a book on Ra, or it's mentioned in the sequel. But there's like another book. Let's say this is the Book of Life that brings death. So they need to find that. So they go to this other museum thing, and they found this little like the slab of rock with all these hieroglyphics, and it's showing Evelyn is reading through it, and there was like a funny little moment where it's like, her brother's telling her like, please hurry up, Evie. And it's like, patience is a virtue. And like Brandon Fraser's like, not right now, isn't? It's like he's pretty much like Emil is pretty much like possessed by releasing all these locusts that kind of bites most of the town, and therefore they're possessed and mind controlled into being like his army, pretty much. And they just trying to burst through. By the way, the mummies in this, I want to know you guys' opinion. Is mummies can still considered as zombies? Because I think they're two completely different things. Even though they're, risen corpses, they're not traditional zombies. Where the fact that because zombies require them they're single-minded to like eating flesh and brains, in particular. These I think these mummies fall under the ghoul subcategory, where they are being controlled and manipulated, and it's something to think about, because like some might say like they're still classified as zombies, but I think zombies at a certain point just became their own thing, and mummies became their own thing. Even though maybe at the beginning they would probably be like the same thing, they rooted from rising from the ground, but like with zombie virus, they kind of like splits that difference. But anyway, they eventually get cornered. Imhotep says like, come with me and I'll leave your friends alone. So she went with him, but then he just like, kill them all. And the Egyptian Egyptologist pretty much like, sacrificed himself so like the Jonathan and Rick can escape. They get a plane ride to where you get to see like this awesome, like, because at the time it was still impressive to see this CGI sand forming a face to attack the plane. It's still pretty impressive. It's like at that time the technology was kind of like bonkers. It's like utilizing CG very well. So they crash land. They crash land, but they were still nearby to follow, because he's still trying to resurrect he still had the goal of resurrecting his love, Anck-su-namun, utilizing Evie as or Evelyn as a vessel. After killing her, her soul will escape the body, leaving it vacant for Anck-su-namun's spirit to inhabit it. That's his overall goal. But they're trying to like make sure they stop them. So Rick and Evie try to fight off all these, mummified soldiers and this mummified Anck-su-namun. While Jonathan is trying to read from the book to stop the mummies from attacking, because they'll just keep on coming. Well, he just keep making more until you get this cool moment where it's like, which I think it's real. There's a stork symbol, hieroglyphic. It means Amonifus, and I don't know if that's like a real word from that hieroglyph. I like to believe so. And he controlled. Jonathan ended up controlling the mummies, and then utilizing the bug to, and Evelyn utilized the bug to summon this like ghostly chariot to snatch away the immortality of Imhotep, making him mortal, allowing Rick to kill him. And his dying words in Egyptian is, death is only the beginning. So now that Imhotep is dead, the whole place is starting to collapse. And of course, it was like filled with like gold and everything like that. And Benny's trying to like, guess as much as you can, but it's like Rick's trying to like, come on, it's not worth it. Get out of here, get out of here. And then like, Benny's in a trapped, and then all the beetles come in and kill him. And they all all three ride off into the sunset, with Evelyn in Rick's arms and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, but this is like a man, this movie still holds up. All honesty, it's like a fun adventure movie with like just the right level of campiness, and like just adventure, campiness, a slight bit of horror. It's just like a great. And of course, it reached this amount of money because it's like a good PG-13 movie, and word spread, and like parents brought their kids to see this and everything like that. It is probably revered across the world as far as like a favorite nostalgic movie, plus probably the best Brendan Fraser movie. Like at least in the top 3 for a lot of people. It's probably other people might consider like maybe Blast from the Past, or there's other stuff that Brendan Fraser's been in, like Encino Man, and they might consider Encino Man's probably like Brendan Fraser's best film. I haven't seen Encino Man in like a long ass time, not since the 90s, as a matter of fact, because I've seen that movie maybe a couple of times in the 90s, Encino Man. And of course, I did not know who Brendan Fraser was at the time. It wasn't until like, this movie that I really started to pay attention to this guy and eventually knew his name. But maybe at some point I will revisit Encino Man, because that is like, really, if you see like a movie with Pauly Shore in it, it's definitely going to be a 90s ass film. Sean Astin, Brendan Fraser, and Pauly Shore, like, yeah, because I didn't know who Sean Astin was either until like my later years. And then of course Pauly Shore was like, I wouldn't say he was the 90s, but he's definitely an instrumental part of it, given how like there's certain like college themed films and stuff like that. Goofy movie is uh, here and there. You see like a wild Pauly Shores popping up. So yeah, maybe at some point I'll do Encino Man at some point, because that'd be fun to revisit. Because I remember enjoying that. But anyway, what do you guys think of the Mummy movie? Like, does it still hold up to you? Have you watched it recently? If not, you definitely should revisit it, because it's a hell of a lot of fun. Great amount of humor. Brendan Fraser at his best, and of course now we're watching Doom Patrol. People has like there's a renaissance going on since the first season of Doom Patrol, because he killed that role as well. But I think me and a few other people in my generation, especially if you grew up in the 90s, you seen Brendan Fraser and stuff, and we had an appreciation. There's a short period he kind of did fell off, but he starts slowly coming back, and you can remember the acting, why we love him, because his acting chops has not lost a step. He is like still amazing at his work. I know season 3 of Doom Patrol is going on, and I need to set some time aside to binge watch as much as I can of that, because I did enjoy the first 2 seasons. I'm not saying I'm losing interest in Doom Patrol, but it's just I don't know. It doesn't, I'm not like eager to like I gotta see this right now kind of situation. I will eventually get around to it though. But yeah, people who've been watching Doom Patrol are loving Brendan Fraser, but me and by and large a few other people has been there from the beginning, not at the tail end. So this Renaissance, I hope it goes on for quite a long time. Brendan Fraser is legit. He's a man. He's the man. So yeah, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to Talkative Carl on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Follow me on my Patreon. Links are in the description. And leave a comment below about like what Brendan Fraser film you think I should check out, that you consider as your favorite. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.